Sergeant Daniel Miller had been on the force for 12 years, and nights like this were his least favorite. Cold, quiet, and empty. The kind of night that made him edgy, like something bad was waiting around the corner. The streets of Redford were dark, save for the dim glow of a few streetlights and the hum of neon from a 24-hour diner. His coffee had gone cold, and his patience was thin. When he saw the old pickup truck rolling ahead with a busted taillight, it felt like a reason to do something, anything, to break the monotony. He flicked on his lights and pulled the vehicle over near the edge of an empty lot. The truck hesitated for a second, then rolled to a stop. Inside, an old man shifted in his seat, hands visible on the steering wheel. Miller approached slowly, one hand on his holster out of habit. He didn't notice the faint reflection of an army decal on the rear bumper or the veteran plates. All he saw was a driver who looked nervous, a man who didn't match the quiet profile of the town. Thomas Reed had just finished visiting his late wife's grave, a weekly ritual he'd kept for almost a decade. His body ached from years of service, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, and his mind still carried the weight of what he'd seen. He wasn't afraid of police, but something about the flashing lights and the tense silhouette approaching his window made his chest tighten. He lowered the window halfway and tried to steady his voice. "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" he asked. Miller shone his flashlight directly into Thomas's face, squinting. "License and registration. You've got a taillight out." Thomas nodded, his hand moving slowly toward the glove compartment. "All right, sir. It's right here. Keep your hands where I can see them." Miller barked. Thomas froze. His heart began to pound. "I'm just getting my papers," he said quietly, his voice steady but tired. "Step out of the vehicle." There was no reason to escalate. None, but Miller's nerves were already ahead of his logic. Something about the hesitation, the slow movement, made him uneasy. He saw a shadow where there wasn't one, a threat where there was only an old man complying. Thomas sighed, unbuckled his seatbelt, and opened the door carefully. The air outside was colder than he expected. "Officer, I'm not looking for trouble," he said. "I just got off the road. My wife." "Hands on the truck," Miller interrupted, tone sharp. Thomas complied, resting his palms on the hood. The cold metal bit into his skin. He looked over his shoulder, confused. "You're treating me like I've done something wrong," he said. Miller didn't answer. He was running the plates through his radio, his nerves buzzing with the static. Dispatch was slow to respond, and the silence between transmissions only made the moment stretch longer. "Name," Miller demanded. "Thomas Reed, Sergeant, U.S. Army, retired." The name should have meant something. Respect, pause, a moment of recognition. But Miller only heard a tone that sounded too sure, too confident. He mistook dignity for defiance. "Stay where you are." Thomas turned his head slightly. "Officer, please, I'm not resisting. My license is in my wallet, right here." He reached for his back pocket slowly, every movement deliberate. "Stop," Miller shouted. Thomas froze mid-motion, both hands hovering. "It's my wallet." But Miller's mind had already filled in the blanks. A dark night, a man reaching for something. Fear trumped reason. He grabbed his baton, his voice cracking with adrenaline. "Down. Get down now." Before Thomas could speak, the first strike landed across his shoulder, hard and fast. The pain shot through him like fire. He stumbled, trying to shield himself, but the second blow came even harder, too. The side of his head. The world tilted, the asphalt rushed up to meet him, and everything went black. For a moment, the street was silent again. The only sound was Miller's heavy breathing and the faint hum of the police radio still asking for his status. He stood there, chest heaving, staring down at the motionless body on the ground. The veteran's cap had fallen off, rolling a few feet away, its embroidered words catching the light. U.S. Army medic. Served with honor. The words hit Miller like a whisper from the dark. His grip on the baton loosened. The adrenaline began to drain, replaced by the cold weight of realization. He knelt down, checking for a pulse, his voice trembling as he called for medical assistance. "Dispatch, I need EMS. Now." But the damage was done. In a small town that liked to believe things like this couldn't happen here, a broken taillight had just changed everything. The story broke before dawn. By the time the sun crept over the rooftops of Redford, every local radio station was repeating the same headline: Black Army veteran hospitalized after police encounter. The phrasing was cautious, sterile, the kind of language meant to hide the violence behind it. But the photo told the truth. A grainy image, snapped by a bystander through a diner window, showed an old man sprawled on the pavement beside his truck. Blood pooled near his head. Captain Jordan Reed saw that photo while scrolling the morning news feed from his apartment in Arlington, Virginia. He was halfway through his coffee when the name hit him like a punch to the chest. Thomas Reed, 63, retired U.S. Army medic. He froze. His father's face, lined and familiar, was unmistakable even beneath the bruises and the oxygen mask. For a second, the world went quiet. No traffic, no birds, just the roar of disbelief in his head. Jordan hadn't spoken to his father in 8 months. Their last conversation had ended in anger, an argument about duty, about family, about how much war had taken from both of them. Thomas had begged him to leave the military after his 3rd deployment. "You've given enough, son," he'd said. "Don't let it swallow you like it did me." But Jordan couldn't quit. He was a soldier to his core, and he thought his father would understand that better than anyone. Instead, they'd drifted apart, both too proud to make the first call. Now, staring at the hospital photo, regret clawed at his throat. He replayed their last argument, the slammed door, the silence that followed, and it felt unbearable. He opened his laptop, searching for more details, desperate for confirmation that this wasn't as bad as it looked. But every article said the same thing: coma, head trauma, internal bleeding. No weapon found. Routine stop. Ongoing investigation. He was already packing before he realized it. His uniform went into the duffel automatically, habit more than thought. Within an hour, he was in his car, speeding toward the small-town hospital that had never been on his map until that morning. At Redford General, the air smelled of antiseptic and bad coffee. Reporters hovered near the entrance, their cameras ready. Jordan pushed through them silently, his posture giving him away, straight-backed, rigid, controlled. When the receptionist asked who he was, he simply showed his military ID. Her eyes widened. "He's in intensive care, sir." "But you can't." He didn't wait for permission. His boots echoed down the hallway, the sound sharp against the sterile tile. When he reached the ICU window, time seemed to stop. Thomas lay motionless under a mess of wires and tubes. His face was swollen, his skin mottled with bruises that looked almost unreal. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was steady, but faint, like a whisper that could stop at any second. Jordan's hands tightened into fists. The strong man who'd taught him how to throw a ball, how to patch a wound, how to keep his head in a firefight, that man looked fragile now, small beneath the white sheets. A nurse entered quietly. "Are you family?" "Yes," Jordan said, his voice rough. "His son." She nodded, sympathy softening her expression. "He hasn't woken up. Head injuries severe. The doctors say it's a matter of time." Jordan swallowed hard. "What happened?" She hesitated, glancing at the badge on his chest. "They said he reached for something during a traffic stop." "But," her voice trailed off. "I've seen those body cam videos before. They always say that." Jordan turned to the window again, his jaw clenched. The air felt heavy, thick with anger and grief. His mind flashed to the medals lined up on his father's dresser: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, a lifetime of service and sacrifice. And this was the thanks he got. He stepped closer to the glass and pressed his hand against it, as if the contact could reach through. "You're not going out like this, old man," he whispered. "Not after everything you survived." Behind him, voices echoed down the corridor, reporters, police officers, administrators arguing about statements and liability. Jordan ignored them all. In that moment, all he cared about was the man in that bed and the promise building quietly in his chest. He took out his phone and scrolled through the contact list until he found the one number he hadn't called in months, an old friend from the Pentagon, now stationed at the Department of Justice. When the voice answered, Jordan's tone was steady, military calm, but cold enough to freeze the air. "This is Captain Reed," he said. "I'm in Redford, and a cop just put my father in a coma. I want every record, every body cam, every name involved on my desk by tonight." He hung up before the voice could reply. Then he turned back to the window, the faint reflection of his uniform staring back at him. For the first time in his life, the medals on his chest didn't feel like honor, they felt like armor. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, dangerous thought took root: justice wasn't going to wait for the system this time. By the time Jordan walked into the Redford Police Department, the story had already exploded beyond the town limits. Cable news vans lined the streets, microphones pointed toward the double glass doors as reporters shouted over one another. Every screen inside the station lobby showed the same headline in bold letters: "Veteran beaten by police officer, family demands justice." The air was thick with tension, a silence just barely holding back the weight of guilt. Jordan stepped through the doors in full uniform, boots polished, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Conversations died mid-sentence. Officers who'd been pretending to work froze at their desks. He didn't shout, didn't wave his rank around, he didn't have to. His presence carried the authority of a man who'd been through wars, both foreign and personal. He stopped at the front desk and spoke quietly, his voice cutting through the heavy air. "I'm here to see Sergeant Daniel Miller." The young officer at the desk swallowed hard. "He's in the chief's office, sir, but..." "Then I'll wait there," Jordan said, already moving. He walked down the narrow hallway lined with department commendations and smiling photos of officers at community events, reminders of the version of Redford the town liked to believe in. But behind one of those doors sat the man who'd nearly killed his father. The police chief, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, stood when Jordan entered. "Captain Reed, I was just about to call you. I want to say, personally, how sorry we are for..." "Don't," Jordan interrupted. "Save your apology for the press conference." The chief's jaw tightened. "I understand you're upset. You don't understand a damn thing," Jordan said quietly. "My father spent 30 years serving this country. He patched up soldiers in the desert while bullets were flying over his head. He saved men who didn't even know his name. And your officer beat him into a coma over a taillight." The words landed like blows. The chief sat back, guilt flickering across his face. "The investigation is ongoing. We've placed Sergeant Miller on leave pending review of the body cam footage." Jordan stepped closer. "Body cam footage that conveniently hasn't been released yet." The chief didn't answer. A knock came at the door, hesitant. When it opened, Daniel Miller stood there, looking pale and hollow. His uniform was rumpled, his badge missing. For the first time since the incident, he looked less like an officer and more like a man facing his own ruin. His gaze dropped when he saw Jordan. "Captain Reed," he said softly. "I didn't know that he was my father." Jordan finished for him. "You didn't need to know. You just needed to know he was human." Miller flinched. His voice cracked. "It all happened so fast. I thought he was reaching for a weapon." "He was reaching for his wallet," Jordan said, his tone razor sharp. "His license was in there. His veteran ID. The one that says medic, not threat." The chief tried to interject, but Jordan didn't take his eyes off Miller. "You put a man in a coma because you were scared of your own shadow. You don't deserve that badge. You never did." Miller swallowed hard. "You think I don't know that? I see his face every time I close my eyes." "Good," Jordan said coldly. "Maybe that means you're still human enough to regret it." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The chief looked between them, torn between procedure and morality. Jordan finally stepped back, exhaling slowly. "My father taught me something you clearly never learned," he said. "Strength isn't about force, it's about control." He turned toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "You'll see justice, Miller, not revenge, not violence. Justice. And it's going to come fast." Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing as Jordan emerged. He didn't stop for questions. Instead, he walked straight to the microphones that had been shoved toward him, his expression calm but unyielding. "My father, Thomas Reed, served this nation for 3 decades, he said, his voice steady, echoing across the square. He survived 3 wars, and he came home to be beaten unconscious by the people sworn to protect him. That ends here. We will have the truth. We will have accountability." Every lens fixed on him. Every officer inside the building listened from behind blinds and half-open doors. For the first time, Redford saw a soldier's anger not as violence, but as a demand for decency. When Jordan returned to the hospital that night, the hallway lights were dim. The machines in his father's room still hummed softly. He sat beside the bed, his hand resting over his father's. "They know now," he whispered. "They all know." And though Thomas Reed didn't stir, something about the faint rise and fall of his chest felt different, steadier, stronger, as if somewhere deep inside, he'd heard his son's promise.